Hello and welcome to Karen's Colours. I'm Dr. Karen and I talk about colour, not in terms of art, but actually in terms of the way in which we use colour to interact with one another. If you are one of my subscribers or have been here before, then you would know that I talk about colour in terms of personality and how that influences the way in which we interact with one another. If you haven't been here before, then this might all be something that you've never heard of before, which is why I've entitled it What Most People Miss About Colour, because colour influences behaviour. As we all know, humans are pre-programmed to see colour, and this is because sunlight gives out certain energies within its light. It reflects off an object and into our eyes, and what we see is that reflected light. But there are variations to this. Some people have normal vision, and that would be the majority of us. Some of them have what is known as protanopia, which is a red-green weakness. Then there's tritanopia, which is a blue-yellow weakness, or the person could see as a monochrome, so that there are very few, if any, colours at all noticed. The only thing that is noticed, of course, are shades of darkness and light. But these differences of vision apparatus and ability are something that is fairly rare among the human population. For most of us, colour links to concepts. That is, the way we think about things, the way we evaluate things, and the way in which we react to things that occur within our environments. Looking at the oldest myths of creation, darkness, regardless of what culture you came from, was always first, and it obscured vision. And then chaos emerged. Here is where vision became an important part. Form was able to be recognized, and between darkness and chaos, that form became something that we call desire. That is, a reaching out for something that we could see and touch and feel. And this particular activity was associated with the colour red. Colour recognition is, of course, linked to social needs. It's been formalised into language via the myths that have come out of various different cultural backgrounds, but they all have the same sorts of similarities. For example, the basic colour concepts that all languages have are black and white. They have them for those words regardless if there are other colour terms within that language. Now, I've spoken about this before, and I will leave a link at the back of this video to allow you to have a look at that in more detail. Darkness was associated with unknown dangers and was considered to be unavoidable. It threatened survival. We all needed to sleep, and we tended to sleep during the dark hours, and so that need for sleep made us vulnerable. It was therefore associated with evil, with things getting at us that we could not see or hear or even be aware of until they attacked. And so those things, those dark things, were considered to be extremely strong. And so blackness or darkness became associated with the concept of strength. Lightness, on the other hand, was all about visible dangers. These were avoidable ones, or ones that we moved towards to overcome. They supported survival. It allowed us to find food and water and mates. And it was always associated with something good. That is, we could survive and we could see, and this then became formalized into the concept white. So let's look at each of these concepts in detail. Black is all about all things that are hidden from us. Initially, it was a marker of danger. It was associated with lurking predators, that is, animal and human. And particularly, strangers were problematic because of not only their links to skin colour, but also to the way in which they decorated their skins, which was different to the way that our own kinship groups or tribes decorated their skins. There was a gradual association with specialized knowledge that came associated with the color black. And this had to do with such things as uncommon sense, that is, the ability to be able to sense things that others could not. And this has emerged into the idea of the occult. There were specialized roles as well that emerged. And these, again, were linked to this occult knowledge. The healer, the magician, and even the entertainer, who in earliest times was a storyteller. There's a contemporary idea about blackness that has to do with knowing things that others do not, that has persisted throughout all of our existence as humans. And we call this intuition these days. But there's also an unspoken blackness that we all recognize and we dread because it has a mental illness issue, and we call that one depression. Black is symbolic of suspicious actions and motivation. We don't understand what the black personality is thinking or doing at any given moment. And this idea of not understanding or being suspicious of the black personality emerges in our idioms and in our representations. So we see black as symbolizing protection, power, elegance, and sophistication. And it has physical effects upon us in that it mystifies us, it can seduce us, it makes us feel secure, but it also intimidates. The positive aspects of black is formality and strength and prestige and authority, all attributes that we give to those in black. The negative side of this is depression, sadness, pessimism, but also a tendency to want to dominate. Moving on to white as a concept. White is all about all things that are visible. It was initially a marker of safety in that you could recognize form, animal, and human. It allowed for kinship recognition, that is, a survival link to familiar colors, both of the body and of its adornment. And there was a gradual association with white and common knowledge, that is, common sense. That is the expected, the most obvious option that occurs. Originally, white was associated with non-specialized roles, that is, everyone in a particular community was involved in all of the tasks of that community. However, eventually specialization did occur, and these were people who were differentiated into hunters, gatherers, carers, warriors, leaders, all sorts of different types and categories of people. It allowed for discovery, that is, spoken truth versus evidence. So what a person said could actually be seen or discovered by everyone in the group. So white, therefore, became symbolic of trustworthy actions and motivations. So white has come to symbolize cleanliness and purity and innocence and perfection. And the effects that white has on us is that it refreshes us, it balances us, it purifies, and it simplifies things. The positive aspects of white are about goodness and hope and clarity and openness. But the negative side of white is also that it is boring, it's cold, it's empty, and it's distant. Now, regardless of the type of society that existed, there was always one mythical hue that came up first, and that was the color red. It began with the first human recognition of life cycles, particularly those associated with blood. Then there were male bonding rituals and also female reproductive functions that were all associated with red. Let's look at those in a little bit more detail. The recognition of life cycles was an overwhelming attention grabber. That is, we found protein-rich food that we could see and kill, and when we did kill it, one of the first things that came out of that dead body was blood. But there were dangers involved in hunting, and those dangers persist even to today. Hunting could cause all sorts of permanent damage. And again, it was associated with delivery of blood and therefore red. The male bonding rituals were all associated with male scarification, that is, scarring the skin, and also the symbolism of the initiation ceremonies. This allowed males to enter into the adult world of performative masculinity. In terms of female reproductive functions, on the other hand, it was all about the birth process, which gives and also takes life, and of course is always associated with the loss of some blood. But more insidious than that was the cause of menstruation. Now, menstruation indicates sexual maturity. But even today, bleeding is something of a taboo. It was the recovery from wounds, either symbolic wounds or actual wounds. And so it is rather amusing that we have very little, apart from cartoon symbols, to indicate anything to do with menstruation, because it still is maintained as a taboo, even though we no longer lock women who are menstruating away from men just in case they contaminate them. So red as a concept tends to symbolize action, strength, energy, and passion. And the effect it has on humans is it grabs attention, it motivates, it stimulates, but it also cautions us against hasty action. Positive ideas associated with red are sexuality and courage and desire and confidence. But the negative ones are all about anger and danger and revenge and aggression. So why does this matter? Well, our primordial archetypes allows us to have culture that arises from a shared symbolism. That shared symbolism is eventually formalized into a language, and the purpose of that language is always to transmit information. Color language actually permits linguistic shortcuts. Hence, we have hierarchical and social information that is easily recognized via color. And there are visual links to emotions, conduct, and expectations. Things such as flags, ornamentation, and clothing gives information about individuals and societies. So let's do a little experiment, shall we? Imagine that you are confronted by three people and we are playing the game Two Truths and a Lie. Two of these people are telling the truth. One of them is telling a lie. Looking at them, because they are identical, except for the color that they are wearing, which would you consider to be the person who is telling the lie? Put your comments down below and let's discuss just why it is that you would choose one over the other two as the liar of the group. If that's too easy, try this one. We notice that the colors that are closest to the face are considered more significant. We tend to notice those more. Now, imagine you are at a casual social event. You don't know any of the people there, but here they are, 6 of them. Who do you think is most likely to be a doctor, a banker, a politician, or a tradesperson? And why would you choose specifically those people with those colors to represent those particular professional groups? The responses that you have will be socially conditioned. You didn't make those up, you've learned them. And a third, more complex setting. Here we have all 9 permutations, those with 2 different colors and those with just 1 color. With whom would you prefer to engage in the following? A ceremony, a long holiday, a personal crisis, or a lifelong friendship? Again, pop your comments down below and just imagine if those were the choices that you had and you had to make a choice, what choices would you make? So the answer to the question I asked originally, what do most people miss about colour, is that colours are a shortcut to an impression. They both give out what it is that you are putting on your body and presenting to the world, but also what you receive from looking at what other people have put on their bodies and are sending out to the world themselves. This allows us to categorize other people into certain types. And I'll give you some examples here. I had a very dear friend who recently passed, who always wore black. She dyed her hair black. She did not wear any other color at all. She was an extremely competent academic, but she was also fairly friendless. And time again, she was overlooked for promotion. This had to have been tied to the ideas that we associate with someone who is constantly in black. The idea that this is not particularly trustworthy. Yet she always worked to the best of her competence. On the other hand, there was a colleague that I knew who was always in white. Now, this lady was not an academic, she was a support person. She was considered to be friendly and outgoing and fairly happy. She was considered to be friendly and outgoing and fairly happy most of the time. But she was also considered to be fairly unreliable. If there was something important that had to be done fairly soon, she tended to be bypassed for those tasks. If you needed information from her, there was a good chance that the information was erroneous because she had forgotten something important about the answer. Again, white is considered to be fairly scatterbrained. On the other hand, there was a colleague that always wore a large amount of red. She didn't get dressed in red entirely, but there was always red of some sort around her face. Now, this lady was considered to be a bit of a go-getter, but she was also fairly aggressive in her interactions. She tended to push herself to be in charge of most things. If there was someone in a group who needed to take on a role of leadership, she would challenge anyone who stood up for that role and usually subsumed it for herself. That allowed her to be promoted because she was considered to be fairly experienced, even though underneath she was primarily disliked by most of her colleagues. So red as a signifier tended to suggest that whilst this person does have some major positive attributes, they also are not the sort of person that most of us want to be associated with. So the conclusion of this is, what do your colours say about you? Do you wear a lot of black, a lot of red, or a lot of white? You're telling other people things about you when you wear those colours, just as the people who wear those colours are telling you things about themselves. So that's it for this session. Try those experiments that I have suggested to you. And next time we meet, we'll look at the next two colours in our lexicon of colour language. And this time it's all about the knowers and the experimenters, yellows and greens. If nothing else, we know that colour influences behaviour and that behaviour can be attributed to particular colours. As I go through this series of developing ideas about what people miss about colour, let's hope that you too will develop an understanding. But in the meantime, look around you. Take notice of those people who wear white, those people who wear black, and those people who wear red closest to their faces. Just observe them for a few moments and see if you can come up with some conclusions as to how they are behaving. Because even though we don't look at ourselves in the colours that we wear, apart from the odd flash in a window or a mirror, we are still influenced by what we put on our bodies in terms of colours. It's the colour that predominates, the one that visually strikes first, that is the one that will guide most of our own conduct and our own way of being. Anyway, we'll leave that here, and I'll see you next time. May the colours of your life bring you all of the things that you desire for your own higher good. See you then. Bye.